Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Mid-City Sermon Cast. So this week we begin the season of Lent, which is a 40-day period of spiritual preparation as we get ready for Holy Week and then the celebration of Easter. And the traditional text that we always read the week that we begin Lent is the story of Jesus's temptation. And so we're going to dive into that scripture today. So the season of Lent is a 40-day period of preparation before Holy Week and Easter, and it's a time that Christians dedicate themselves in a deeper way to practices like worship, studying the scriptures, prayer, serving others. And one of the reasons that Lent is 40 days is that it echoes 40 days that Jesus spent in the wilderness where he was tempted by the devil. And so the 40 days of Jesus's wilderness experience, we kind of echo in this 40-day season of Lent. But I want to read this scripture to you and then dive in a little bit, and hopefully we can unpack what it means a little bit. So this is from Luke chapter 4, verses 1 through 13. So Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tested by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." Jesus answered him, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Then the devil led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil said to him, "To you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been given over to me, and I will give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours." Then Jesus answered him, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil led him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." And when the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. So again, this is the story of Jesus spending this time in the wilderness where he is tempted by the devil. And I don't know about you, but if you've heard this story before, there's a tendency to kind of, I think, hear the word temptation and then to think about these temptations as sort of personal things that we battle with. And by that, I mean things like this. So Jesus was tempted to turn stone into bread, right? So that temptation has to do with our personal appetites. So like last night, I found myself kind of hungry for a snack, and I knew there was some mint chocolate chip ice cream in the refrigerator, and I was tempted to go and get a great big bowl of the mint chocolate chip ice cream, but I didn't give in to the temptation to get the big bowl. Instead, I got a little bowl and I put some chocolate sauce on top of it. And so that's the kind of things that people tend to think of when they think of these temptations. And so if we look at them that way, again, maybe the turning stones into bread represents my appetites and pleasures. The kingdoms of the world might represent wealth and power. The angels might represent pride and my need for validation. And these are all things that I should avoid in my personal life. I heard somebody at one point in time say, that if we read it this way, we could boil Christianity down to don't smoke, don't drink, don't chew, and don't run with those who do, right? That again, it's all about kind of my personal choices and things I do and don't. And that is one way of reading it, and I'm not saying that that's completely without value, but I think there's something bigger going on in this story than just like the temptations to kind of my own personal appetites and things like that. And there's a guy named Walter Wink who suggests that these temptations have to do with leadership and our relationship to power. So that's kind of the way I want us to think about it, and hopefully maybe a little deeper way. So Wink suggests that the temptations in the wilderness expose different ways that humans are tempted to abuse their power, and that there are economic ways, there are political ways, and there are religious ways. So if you think about it, the first thing the devil tempts Jesus to do is turn stones into bread. And he would say this is sort of a form of economic power. Basically, what the devil is trying to get Jesus to do is to use his divine power to pay his grocery bills. Now, here's the thing I was thinking about with this. So imagine instead of the devil appearing before Jesus, that a genie appeared before him. And the genie says to him, "Hey, Jesus, I'm going to give you one wish. And if you want, what's the one thing that you want to be fulfilled?" And that in this situation, again, thinking about kind of from an economic perspective, that what Jesus said is, "Okay, I want $1 billion. Like, give me $1 billion." Now, why would somebody ask for $1 billion? Well, there's all kinds of reasons. We tend to think of money as the solution to all of our problems, right? If I just had enough of it, I would be able to do whatever I want. I'd be able to get whatever I want. Maybe most importantly, I'd be able to get other people to do what I want them to do, right? Like, money has that kind of power to it. But Jesus refuses this economic temptation. And what he's showing is that his mission is not about the power that comes from money or wealth. His mission and his way is about a deeper spiritual power. The second thing that the devil tempts Jesus to do is to give him all the kingdoms of the world. And this represents kind of the human tendency or temptation to have power over others. It's often expressed by political power or military power. So imagine the genie again, right? And the genie said to you, "Okay, look, I'm going to give you one wish. This time your wish is to be a king or a queen or to be the president," right? And you think, "Look, put me in charge. I'll fix everything," right? And isn't that a temptation that we have sometimes? I think, you know what? If I was the boss, if I was in charge, if I had the power, I'd take care of it all. But again, Jesus refuses this temptation, and he shows that his kingdom is not built on political power or military power or power over others. That his kingdom and his way is built on servanthood and on love. So the third thing that the devil tempts Jesus to, and this one's maybe a little trickier in this sense, but is to throw himself off from the top of the temple, right? So you got to think about it. Where is he? He's at the temple, and he's going to throw himself off from the temple. And what the devil tells him is, if you do this, I will. Then there'll be angels who will come, and the angels will rescue you. And basically, what he's telling Jesus to do is put on kind of a religious display or a religious show. Show your religious power. Have angels come in and rescue you. And if you do that, everybody will know that you're the Son of God. Everybody will know you're this great religious figure. You have divine power. Now, we don't think about this very often. But some of the most powerful people in history and in the world are religious leaders. Like one of the most powerful people that came to my mind was the Pope, right? I mean, goodness, you think the Pope's not a military leader or he's not a political leader, but he's this religious leader who has this tremendous influence and power, right? I was trying to think of other people who've been very influential and very powerful in the world, and like a Billy Graham came to my mind, right? So you can be a spiritual person and be a religious person and have incredible power in the world. So maybe, again, to go back to the genie thing, could you imagine a genie coming to you and saying, "Hey, I'll give you one wish, and you wish to be a saint, or you wish to be made somebody like Mother Teresa or somebody who has this tremendous influence in the world, but it comes from kind of this religious place, right? And of course, we would think to ourselves, hey, I'm going to use this for the good of others. But as is often the nature with power, we have to be really careful because power can corrupt us, even religious power, and we see that throughout history. So again, Jesus kind of refuses to put on some kind of religious show for everybody, refuses to use divine power to manipulate other people. And again, he shows us kind of another way. And so this is kind of the way that Walter Wink would have us read these temptations. And I think it's a little more meaningful, right? So Robert Ingersoll said this: "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you really want to test a man's character, give him power. Give him power." And I think, again, this is kind of the temptations that Jesus is facing. So what does all this have to do with you and me? I always want to ask that question about these scriptural stories. So one thing that I want us to be clear about is that you and I have power. Now, some of you might be thinking, I don't have any power. What are you talking about? I'm not the president. I'm not a billionaire. I don't have an army at my command. And that's all true, unless one of you listening is the president or something. But, but seriously, make no mistake about it. We may not have that kind of power, but we do have power in our lives. So I thought it'd be important to take a moment and just ask the question, what is power? And this is probably the best definition I found. Power is the ability to influence or affect people, situations, or outcomes, either through our actions, our words, our resources, or our relationships. But it's the ability to influence and affect people, situations, or outcomes. One of the forms of power that all of us have is we have certain resources at our disposal. And we tend to talk about these as like time, talent, and treasure, right? And these are all things that every single one of us has. And the way that we spend our time really can shape our lives and shape the world around us. One of the things my wife has started doing recently with her time is she goes and volunteers at a local animal shelter, and she takes care of the kitty cats and the puppies, and she actually gets to read while she's doing it. And she's using that resource of hers to try to make a positive difference in the world. We all have certain talents and things that we bring to the table, whether it's organizing stuff, teaching, encouraging other people, creating things. And one question we should ask ourselves is, how are we using that ability in the world to make a difference? How are we using that power? Treasure is one, and that obviously has to do with money. And you don't have to be like a billionaire to make a difference in the world. All of us have influence that we can, and there are things we can do with our money, whether it's supporting people in need, investing in things that matter. We also all have influence in the world. Parents have influence over their children's lives. If you're a teacher or a tutor or a mentor, you can speak good things into the lives of other people, and you can influence the world that way. We can also use our words to tear other people down and have negative influence, right? I remember there was a kid in one of my youth groups one time who was just always making trouble, and he always seemed to have a little gang of kids with him that were always getting in trouble. And it hit me all of a sudden when I realized that, this kid was one of the key leaders in our youth group. He had that power of leading other people. He was just using it for evil, right? And so I actually pulled the kid aside at one point in time. His name was Pete. And I said, "Hey, Pete," I said, "you know what? You're actually one of the leaders in this group. People look up to you and they follow you, but you're using that power like for bad right now. You're like causing trouble and you're making difficulties for everybody." And I posed the question, and I said, what would happen if you would use that power and that ability for good, right? Now, I'll tell you this, I never really saw a difference in Pete's behavior, but I have this dream that maybe somewhere down the line he remembered this youth group who asked him, "Hey, what are you using your power for?" This youth director, and maybe he changed some things, right? So you and I have power. And that question that I asked to Pete, I think, is really the question that we need to ask ourselves. What are we doing with our power? Are we just using it for ourselves and for sort of selfish ends? Are we using it to care for others? So the world tells us that we really should use our power for ourselves. But Jesus and the gospel really points us in a very different direction. In Philippians 2, 3, and 4, Paul writes this: "Don't do anything for selfish purposes, but with humility think of others as better than yourselves. Instead of each person watching out for their own good, watch out for what is better for others." And I want to say this because I think it's important. I don't think this means that we have to deny ourselves or neglect ourselves, but we certainly should not think only of ourselves, but also to the interests and the needs of others. And Jesus really tells us that if we're looking for sort of our own fulfillment in life, that's really where we're going to find it. It's in caring for and serving others. So several weeks ago, I got to go out on our church's Love Your Neighbor van. And for those of you who don't know about that, it's a ministry we began back in January where a van is going out from the church and going out and meeting our homeless siblings that are on the street and bringing them warm coffee, food, socks, shoes, medical kits, just different things to try to make their lives a little bit better. And again, I was privileged to ride on that van and get to go out and meet some folks. And the way I've described it to people is it is both heartbreaking and beautiful. It's really sad to see that there are some people who are living in the conditions that they're living in, but it's also beautiful to see how just a little bit of kindness and a little bit of love goes a long way of just bringing a little hope, a little dignity, and a little light into people's lives. But when I was getting kind of debriefed before I rode out on the van, I got to spend some time with a member of our church who I've known a little bit, but got to know a little bit better, and her name's Marguerite Ritter. And Marguerite is a social worker, and when she found out about the van, she said right away that she knew she wanted to be a part of it. And so she's in charge of sort of organizing the van team, making sure the right supplies are there. She helps, like she did with me, to kind of debrief us about some things that we might see out on the street. And Marguerite has poured tons of time and energy and resources into this ministry and has really become an essential part of making it happen. And just when I was thinking about how you and I are called to use our power for the good of others, Marguerite kind of came into my heart and my mind. Again, she uses a lot of her time and a lot of her energy to love and to care people through this van. But I asked her, I said, Marguerite, I said, why do you do this? And this is what she told me. She said she really believes that this is what God is calling her to do. To use her skills, to use her time, not just to watch out for herself, but to care for others. So Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" And as we consider Jesus's temptation in the wilderness, what I hope you'll take away from this is this: that Jesus was tempted to use his own power, his resources, and the things that he had to serve himself. And that what he chose over and over again to do was to serve God by loving others. That's what Jesus spent his life doing, caring for others. And if we're going to follow him, that's how you and I should use our power and our resources as well. So that's the question I want to leave you with today. And it's a great question for us to kind of start out this Lenten journey. What are you doing for others? I'll catch you next time, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Mid-City Church Sermoncast. If you'd like to find a home sheet, a resource that accompanies the sermoncast that has more questions to explore, the scriptures we use today, and more information, you can visit our website, midcity.church/sermoncast. If you'd like to support Mid-City Church by giving, please text the word GIVE to 225-307-0662. Thank you for your generosity, and we look forward to seeing you next week.